Welcome everyone to today's webinar. I am Abby Krause with Becker's Hospital Review. We will begin today's webinar with a presentation, and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session, and we're excited to have Scott Becker here to help moderate that today. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into your control panel in the space labeled Enter a Question for Staff and clicking Send. We are looking forward to hearing your questions. Today's session is being recorded and will be available after the event. In about a week following the webinar, we will be sending all registrants a copy of the presentation to the email you used to register. Please be patient as the post-webinar preparation of materials can take some time. At this time, it is now my pleasure to start today's webinar by introducing our presenters. Vicki Newmiller is the CEO of the Great Falls Clinic in Great Falls, Montana. Vicki has been with the Great Falls Clinic since 2008 and previously served as the Chief Operating Officer of the Great Falls Clinic Health System. Vicki is a registered nurse by trade and holds a Bachelor of Science in Nursing and a Master of Health Administration from the Montana State University System. Vicki has over 30 years of experience in the healthcare field, serving in both clinical and executive roles. Nick Santor is the Senior Director of Customer Finance at Intuitive. Nick started his career in the healthcare finance industry in 1997. Over his 20-year career, he has consulted with medical facilities with their acquisitions ranging from blood analyzers to building cancer clinics. During this time, he has assisted hospitals with expanding or starting more than 700 robotic programs, which have led to surgeons and patients gaining access to Da Vinci technology. In 2013, he joined Intuitive to create the Intuitive Global Customer Finance Company. During his time at Intuitive, he has held various roles, such as Director of Global Pricing and Vice President of Key Accounts. Currently, the initiative for ISI Customer Finance is to expand their internal solutions to provide expanded access of Intuitive technologies. At this time, I am pleased to turn the floor over to Vicki to begin today's presentation.
Thank you so much, Abby. Good afternoon from the frozen state of Montana. I really appreciate you joining us today to talk about the Great Falls Clinic journey to add the robotics service line to our organization. As Abby mentioned and was quite generous, I have over 30 years of healthcare experience. And the reality is that I did cut my teeth, as a registered nurse, and I'm recovering. I still continue to have nightmares over what the night shift memories were, but acclimated over time into Director of Nursing and Chief Operating Officer roles, and I've been with the clinic now for 11 years, and I've been the CEO for the clinic operations now for 5.5 years. So I started my role as really a registered nurse in a critical access hospital, and certainly in those smaller facilities you get an opportunity really to understand the nuances of an organization and really focusing on cost-saving opportunities and opportunities to try to develop service lines thoughtfully. And so as we focused on the clinic, it was really important for us to look at what service lines we thought were going to really be an advantage to our organization. Great Falls, Montana is north centrally located in the state of Montana, and much to many of your probably surprise, we actually do have automobiles in Montana, and we don't actually have to come to work on our horses. But although I understand now recently on the Fox News petitioner, Ian Hammond recommends that selling Montana to Canada for $1 trillion to put towards the national debt, today at least we're still a part of the United States. So as I talk about Great Falls, our community is 65,000 people, but we do have a service population area of 250,000. We're home to Malmstrom Air Force Base. We have roughly 5,000 servicemen that work at Malmstrom Air Force Base. As I talk about our market, certainly we have, we're one of 2 hospitals, and we have a large not-for-profit hospital that's a level 2 trauma center. And they also added a physician practice probably about 10 years ago. The clinic has really been known as offering the physician practice service to the community for a lengthy period of time, and I'll go into that a little later. But certainly for us, looking at what we offer to the community, and we all believe that competition is very, very important in our markets, so we can really focus on improving our quality and looking at the service lines that make sense to our industries. We actually built a replacement hospital back in 2016. We had a smaller facility that we actually took over operations of in 2006. And we knew that as we were looking at our footprint, we needed a facility to be close to our medical campus. But one of the features that restricted us as we looked at our new replacement facility, as one of the requirements for ACA, restricted physician-owned hospitals, as many of you know, from expanding. And so as we look at our facility today, it's really based on making sure that we kept the same numbers with our physician ownership. The Great Falls Clinic itself was established in 1917. We're actually the fourth oldest clinic west of the Mississippi. And back in 2017, we celebrated our century mark. We had a great celebration in our community, but the Great Falls Clinic actually didn't enter into the hospital market until 2006. And as the previous slide showed, we built our replacement hospital in 2016. The difference in our hospital that we built in 2016, although we had to maintain the 19 inpatient beds and the operating rooms and procedure rooms because of the ACA requirement with physician-owned hospitals, we were able to add the 7 bay ER, 7 observation beds, and then most recently, we added a cath lab. Since actually opening our facility in 2016, we actually are over max capacity of our 19 inpatient beds about 50% of the time in terms of total observation and inpatient beds. So as we really tried to understand why robotics made sense for the Great Falls Clinic, as CEOs, we're always looking to our mission, vision, and values and trying to understand what service lines that we should enter into. And as we were assessing our growth strategy, it was important for us to determine where robotics played the part into that role. And certainly for us, the Da Vinci service line was important because it was been in our market and certainly in our state for a number of years. And we were losing a fair amount of our surgical volumes because our competitor had the Da Vinci service line at their facility. And so a lot of our prostates and a lot of our GYN procedures were being done at our competitor just simply because we didn't have the tool. The other piece that was real important to us is that, you know, patients will travel outside of their community for technologies that they believe is going to benefit them, whether it's return to work, whether it's making sure that the complications are low, and certainly robotics has received a lot of attention on decreasing complications and enhancing recovery. So for us, our patients were demanding it, and we knew that without that as a service line, we were losing some of our market share. Certainly from the physician piece, we also knew that that was essential. As I go into kind of building our performa, we have a lot of independent providers that use our organization, but as we were looking to recruit within our market, we had physicians basically that were requesting the technology as well. And so we had one urologist, you know, that we were actively recruiting, and for him, the robotic service line was a very important technology as he had basically been working with that technology in his residency program. So as we've kind of looked at it as a vital service line for recruiting our surgeons, you know, we knew that we had to address, you know, those cases that could be brought to our facility, the cases that we were losing currently, and then also always looking at potential incidental volume that we could be adding just by physicians filling up their blocks. Certainly with our facility being only 19 beds, the limited bed capacity also played a big role in our determining that this was the right service line for us. With only 19 beds, obviously, it's important to not have a patient having a hysterectomy, having a 3-day length of stay, when robotically they could have less than 24 hours and being in an outpatient status. So for us, that was also one of the limiting factors that we really knew that was going to be prohibitive if we didn't make a change in that service line. And then lastly, it's just improved patient outcomes and satisfaction. And so we knew that patients are searching for that technology, and whether it's inside of our market or outside of our market, people will travel to where they think the technology will enhance their experience and their outcomes. So this just kind of showcases, as we look to the quadruple aim, really focusing on patient and physician request, vital service line for recruiting surgeons, lowering costs, and improved outcomes. And so for us, looking at this with the quadruple aim, it is very important for us to think about how the robotics play a part in terms of the quadruple aim. Certainly, improved health outcomes. You know, what we've witnessed here is that patients have lower readmission rates, they have quicker return to work, they have less opioid usage, and all of that is important as we're all focused on meeting the quadruple aim in our healthcare markets. Improved physician satisfaction, certainly. Providers are very satisfied with our robotic service line, and them being able to actually share that service line with their patients at our facility is essential for them. Physicians will travel to where that technology is available. Lower costs, I mean, when we think about lower costs, and I know that that's one of the big issues that people are focused on with the Intuitive product, and certainly looking at our supply cost per each case is important, but there's so much more encompassed around lower costs. And lower healthcare costs really need to be overall healthcare costs, whether it's length of stay, whether it's reduced sick time, reduced readmissions, and quicker return to work. All of that impacts the healthcare costs in our communities and is important for us as we go out there talking to the larger employers and how we can partner with them to reduce healthcare costs for their industries. And then the better patient experience, as I've mentioned before. I mean, patients really want to find where they're going to have better outcomes, lower length of stay, and that we can pass those on with this technology at our fingertips. So this slide just simply reveals that there's a computer between the doctor and the patient with robotics. And what we have found is that data is our friend. And as all of us go out there trying to determine how to make a difference in our markets and differentiate ourselves amongst our competitors and other people that may have the same platform, it's important to remember that data is what really is going to drive business through our doors if we can showcase the data and heading in the right direction. This is always a moving target. When you look at data, you have to understand what your supply costs are, what your expenses are via, doc time or console time. And then certainly the other information that we find just invaluable with the technology, with Intuitive, is we can do comparisons within our specialties. And that's essential for us to look at where our opportunities are to streamline those expenses and eliminate the variation when we can. So some of the challenges prior to our investment, I think, is we did not know what the cost of equipment and supplies were going to be, and certainly we knew what the national averages were for supplies, but those are all variables for each individual surgeon, and we certainly saw examples of that even in our own business, where we see just different GYN surgeons that have a different basic usage of those instrumentations and accessories that we're able to kind of focus on. But we didn't understand what that was, so we actually used the national data provided by Intuitive as our platform, as our starting point. When we looked at our volumes, it was important for us to understand what our current volume was and what could be converted to robotic cases, but as well for us, it was predicted new business. And so we had a population of GYNs that really didn't utilize our facility very often. And so for them, it was important to know that we had this technology, and especially the latest XI unit, and we can talk about some of the other investments we made as well, and I'll talk about that a little later. But we needed to get their commitment on what that new business was going to be if we actually invested in this technology. We worked with Intuitive to build a pro forma, and it was very essential that we built a very, very conservative pro forma as I went out to basically, my boards to try to get approval for this as a service line. But we had somewhat of a risk because 90% of the surgeons that were basically committing to bringing cases to us were independent. And when they're not your employed providers, it's a challenge to know whether they're actually going to be able to bring those volumes to you that they predicted. And so that was somewhat of a risk to us, but we felt that it was very important to gauge what their volumes might be if we had the technology at our fingertips. We certainly knew that we could make a difference from the patient experience in our hospital, and that's something that you absolutely have to focus on when you're building a robotic service line. It's in your hands to make sure that the patient knows the difference in the experience at your facility. And then lastly, we were challenged because we didn't have any in-house expertise, and we knew that recruiting a experienced robotics director was going to be very essential to ease the surgeon's mind that they had experience at their fingertips in the operating rooms. So as we looked at developing our business plan, as I mentioned, I mean, we really wanted to look at some very conservative numbers and really trying to figure out what the best opportunities were for us to predict the volume. So when we built our business plan, it was based on 22 cases a month. And when we looked at that, we also knew that there were going to be some other incidental cases that were brought to our market. But at the same time, we wanted to make sure that our pro forma and our business plan were very conservative. We wanted to also assess the potential in-market volume that we were currently losing because we didn't have the technology in our organization. We assessed our recruiting needs. So we needed to understand what our recruitment goals were and what technology they were looking at when they were making a decision of where to be recruited to. So for us, at the time, we were looking to recruit a urologist, and it was essential for him that we have the robotic platform in our organization, as he was looking for, you know, a lot of different opportunities, and that was an important goal for him. The other piece that was really important to us, and Nick's going to talk about it in a few slides, is for us, the opportunity to finance with Intuitive gave us the time to focus on the development of our service line rather than focusing on trying to make the payment on the actual robot itself. And so for us, financing with Intuitive was an essential part of our business plan. We put intense focus on ensuring our providers and patients had an exceptional experience. Certainly, surgeons, when they're independent, they want to look for the best experience. They want to make sure your operating room has quick turnover times, that they're responsive, they have a good experience when they're here. That was essential to us, and then as well for our patients. For instance, we didn't have any GYN business before we got into the market with Da Vinci. And that population of patients was really looking for more of an experience that was similar to a spa experience. So we focused basically the experience of that patient to make sure that they had slippers and bathrobes and flowers, and so we went above and beyond to make sure that when they were in our organization, they felt the difference and that it really was more of a spa experience as they were going through a surgery at our organization. So that was important for us to make sure that the experience was exceptional. One of the things that I mentioned before was the fact that we had limited bed capacity with only 19 inpatient beds. It was important for us to look at how we could have a reduced length of stay. And certainly with Intuitive, we can go from an open hysterectomy of 3 days down to, you know, less than 24 hours, certainly with the colorectal as well, and I'll talk a little bit about that in some further slides. But we wanted to also make sure that this aligned with our mission. We're all focused on population health. We're all focused on helping people in the market reduce their healthcare costs. That's important to organizations, and the larger employers in our communities want to see what we're doing to help with those healthcare expenses, and we believe that this is a part that we can play, and we can share the data. And if we know that we're reducing opioid usage, and we know that we're increasing or reducing the time to return to work, those are things that we can go out and measure and really align with the mission of the organization to improve the population of the people we serve. So we took the plunge. It was a big decision for our organization, and the reality is when we built the pro forma, we knew that we needed to be very conservative. We needed to understand that we weren't being overly aggressive in the pro forma, and so the pro forma that we built was based on all governmental payers. Certainly part of the pro forma was financing with the Da Vinci system and utilizing a 6-month bridge, and so that helped us spend the first 6 months focusing on building our program, hiring and recruiting talent, and focusing on just making sure that our program was a well-oiled machine, and then we could focus on making the payments on our Da Vinci unit. So for us, financing was a very important piece. And then, of course, hiring and recruiting experienced robotic staff is essential because the providers want to have a good experience with a lot of knowledge base when they're in the OR, and especially when you have surgeons that are going through the training themselves. They want that level of expertise in the operating room that is really there by their side as they develop their skills with the robotics tool. And so for us, in determining to finance, we felt it was important for our market because it was a new technology, and there were some skeptics. I think the reality is that we built the performer conservatively, but we still also wanted to make sure that we were thoughtful in our financing plans so we could really build the model and prove it over time, which is the period of 4 to 5 years, and we've been very successful in doing that. But it was important for us to focus on actually the program and building the program methodologically, So we needed to do that, and we need to be very thoughtful on doing that and having the time to do that without the focus of paying for the unit itself in the first 6 months. And so we put our immediate efforts on training staff, educating providers in the market so they knew that the technology was in our facility, and then also setting the stage for the customer experience. And so for us, we could really put a lot of effort on making sure we had good education tools, that we were hitting our marks with opioid usage, getting out there, working with our surgeon group to make sure that everybody was on the same page with opioid usage and the amount of time for an uncomplicated case for a return to work, and making sure that our team was focused on those type of things. So we were actually in ability to focus on our service line without hitting the pressures of the performer in the early months by making the payment on the unit itself, and that 6 months bought us that technology in time. So the financing details that we were able to negotiate certainly was the operating lease with the interest rate of 3%, so very competitive rates, a 4-year lease, and as I mentioned, the 6-month bridge without payments, and then no prepayment penalty as well. So those were all important features for us in our financing details. So our program today, we have 5 GYN surgeons, and that number originally was 3. We actually still have 2 in training. And so the reality is this tool is very important in your market. And so what we found was our providers that didn't have robotics training, and as their patients were coming to them to ask for this technology, what that did is it drove more of our surgeons to go and get trained with Intuitive. And so we originally had 3 GYNs and 3 general surgeons, and so you can see our numbers are increasing. And our urologist went from 1 to 2, and then most recently we added a thoracic surgeon. He's an independent surgeon in our community, and it was a service line for him that he needed to differentiate amongst the other thoracic surgeons in the state. And so for him, it was important to get this education at his fingertips and offer this as a service to his patients. So our program is certainly growing. The other piece that we've added is that we actually purchased a simulator at the time that we purchased our Da Vinci unit. And the reason we did this is that as we were evaluating our credentialing and trying to make sure that we had a good platform for credentialing within our community, we felt that it was essential for us to have the simulator at our fingertips. And one of the things that we focused on was we make sure that all of our surgeons in the community and even outside of the community have access to our simulator. So right now, I believe there are only 2 simulators in the state of Montana. And so for us, we allow surgeons to even come from outside of our community to get some simulator time as they're trying to get credentialed either as a new provider or just to gain the experience if they don't have the volumes on the robot that keep them credentialed easily. So for us, it was just raising that level of expertise in the market. And so for us, having the simulator is very important to do that. The other piece is that most recently we purchased the table motion. And as we looked at the motion table, it was important for us to look at basically the undocking time when you're repositioning patients. And as well, our anesthesia team were very anxious to add this as technology for those patients that might need more opportunities for repositioning, but also some of the airway management. And the repositioning with the motion table is absolutely, it's awe-inspiring to actually watch it in action, but truly our surgeons and our anesthesia team are thrilled with this technology that they have as well. So kind of looking at our service line, you can see that the majority of our cases today are GYN, then general surgery. Thoracic is a fairly new service line for us that we added this last year and a half. And then our urology business is growing as we've recruited our new urologist. And then colorectal is out of our general surgery pool, but it is certainly a part of business that we're really focusing on. And certainly for us, as we look at our data, data is everything as we go out and really try to figure out if we're making a difference in the service line that we're offering. And so when we were doing our open colorectal cases, certainly, we went from a length of stay of 7 down to 3.8, and that's noteworthy. And certainly part of our length of stay in reduction is us focusing on, the things that are going to really, help us reduce healthcare costs that we can pass on to our patients. And certainly part of this is that we actually put in an ERAS, so an enhanced recovery after surgery program, and it's really been on our colorectal population. But for us, it's been absolutely a great program that we've really seen that we could make a big difference in trying to get these outcomes so we can have a lower length of stay, and as well the patients that are discharged they're using less opioids, they're returning to work quicker, and certainly the length of stay is obvious. So 3.2 days of savings, which is really equates to about $5,000 a case savings. And so for the financial people in the room, just wanting to share basically our summary of the cases that we've had this last year. And so our average gross charge per case, $32,000, and our average reimbursement per case, $11,000. Our supply cost per case, we've got in here at $2,000. $1,500 of it is our average for our instrument and accessories with Intuitive. The other $500 is just for case support in the operating room. Then other direct case cost per case is staffing. So for us, this has been a very, very beneficial service line to our organization financially. And you can see in there the cost of the equipment. And then we also have really benefited from, as I mentioned, our Performa. They were all governmental when we built the Performa, and we are enjoying a 45% commercial rate. And that's largely because of our GYN population that are bringing cases to us. And so, we still in Montana enjoy our commercials paying a percentage of billed charges. And so for us, this has been a very, very favorable payer mix and certainly financial report that's very evident to our board. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Nick, and he's going to talk a little bit about the Intuitive financing. And there you go. I'll turn it over to Nick.
Thank you, Vicki. It's great to hear how using multiple departments from an Intuitive ecosystem is to achieve your goals around quadruple aim is really helping. After I spend a little time talking about Intuitive customer finance story, Vicki will come back and continue to walk us through the Great Falls Clinic, the success story, and demonstrate how everyone from the rural community hospital all the way to the major academic can implement intelligent surgery. So, whenever you're doing these presentations, it's funny how sometimes you take a look back about your career. It made me think a little bit when I was preparing for this. It made me think, am I older than I think I am? I ask this because I realized over the past 17 years or so, I've been around this technology, one way, shape, or form, whether I was with the banking industry or working for Intuitive now. With 4 generations of technology and 6 million procedures, it's pretty neat just to be a small part of this really cool story. As Vicki said, the financing was part of the Great Falls Clinic story, and it's exciting to hear how we're making an impact. So let's talk about evolution of acquisition solutions. During the early days, up and including our 2nd generation technology, the Da Vinci S system, the majority of our customers chose a path of ownership. They wanted to own it. They wanted to have an ROI to measure. Usually the hospital put together a business case with some surgeons around the service line. They created the ROI and they went through their capital budget process and they bought the system. So a lot of customers like to own it that way, or they went through this other acquisition model where they actually got philanthropy and went out and sought donors to donate some money to acquire the Da Vinci system, sometimes even put a name on it. So that was in the early days. That's how people wanted to acquire the technology. Then as the system grew in popularity, obviously the physician preference gained strength. Hospitals looked for ways to acquire additional systems. And sometimes the system was off budget cycle. As I said, I've been around the technology since the early days. However, around 2009, when I was working at the bank with a third-party finance company, we really started to see an increase in the number of systems that were being financed in the marketplace. I think this is really where customers wanted to stay ahead of technology, so they started using FMV leases. And in 2006 and all the way up to 2009, when our SI system was put out in the market, became available, the growing healthcare finance marketplace really started to facilitate some flexible models out there. And this is where we saw a lot of growth around financing of Da Vinci systems. Then in 2013, Intuitive decided to establish our own internal capabilities. And this was so we could continue to help customers solve the problems they face when it comes to accessing our technology. Over the past 5 years, we have worked hard to listen deeper to customers in order to design financial solutions that meet their challenges. This customer-centric approach is not new to anyone, but it does focus on first principle thinking of solving the real problem. We have staffed the customer finance organization globally with dedicated professionals who spend time with customers and our teams, creating solutions for the customer to acquire the Da Vinci system. Then we work with the team to put it in play and spread it out to more customers so more customers can gain access to our technology. And going back to that first question, it's obvious I am older than I think I am. Now, after 17 years of providing financial solutions for customers to acquire this amazing technology, I feel privileged to be a small part of this amazing Intuitive story. So let's talk a little bit about why customers seek acquisition models. I think, as Vicki said, they had a specific reason what they were looking for, but through many customer engagements, we tried to focus in on the reasons why customers want to go through this model. And we understand that various obstacles exist that can create hesitancy in acquiring our technology. And these obstacles include limited capital funds. There's not many times where CFOs are not trying to find money versus having money sit around. So limited capital funds is always a pressure on hospitals and healthcare organizations. With ever-changing technology, and as technology moves from one generation to the other, technology obsolescence is a risk for some folks. And they're looking to us to say, hey, can you guys help us with this? Is this something that you guys can help us stay ahead of? Then there's capitalize on strategic opportunities. As Vicki said in her presentation, they started a thoracic program. It just might be an opportunity as part of the strategy for a hospital to move open procedures to MIS, that there's a surgeon who wants to come join the organization. There's a strategic opportunity to help move open procedures over to MIS, and that's something that we see happen quite often. Unfortunately, there are some experiences with third-party leasing companies. And I work for one. They're good people. However, with technology obsolescence and the competition around the how do you spread your money around, there's leasing companies who maybe don't have a great experience by providing solutions that meet the needs of the customers. So sometimes those customers come to us and want to talk to us about the models we have versus the models that are out in the market. And probably last and most popular is the unmet surgeon or clinical need. There's a lot of open procedures still done today in the healthcare environment, and having them done robotically is something we see happen often. The Intuitive Surgical Finance team can work with you to provide solutions to overcome your obstacles and enable you to get the technology you need when you need it. Essentially, we're a strategic resource for our customers. Greater than 90% of our solutions are customized to meet the unique needs of our institutions. Now that we understand the why, then we had to put the programs in place for the customers to actually take advantage of. Programs that would deliver value, not just a financial solution. From transparency around rates and residuals to flexible language at the end of the term of the agreement. We're looking for customers to stay current with our technology as they look to achieve their quadruple aim goals. With that in mind, here are some of the different ways we've helped our customers in the past, depending on their specific situations. Fair market value agreement with upgrade pathway and purchase options. Deferred monthly payments to bridge the next fiscal year. You've heard Vicki talk about that a little bit. We've also had customers ask us for step leases where they had budgeted dollars already set aside. And we'll get into a couple of these later in a couple slides here. short-term risk share agreements where a customer just wants to, has a short-term need that we come in and design a solution that gets them from one spot to the other. And finally, fee per procedure agreements utilizing operating funds for customers to take advantage of our program. So let's take a look at a few of the strategic acquisition models we've designed with the assistance of our customers. Many of our customers are repeat customers, meaning they already have a third or fourth generation technology. They're looking to upgrade or expand. Therefore, many times the customer has budget allocated for service. And you see in the step lease, one of the programs we designed was to put that payments across the first 12 months of the year, and then spread the next 48 months of payments over months 13 through 60. This really helps the customer move from one technology to another without disrupting their budget cycle. Very popular with many of our customers. Let's take a look at another program, one that was already highlighted by Vicki. And I think this is a very popular model because it really helps customers who are looking to stay within their budget constraint, but also get access to the technology now. Our bridge program allows the customer to have no payments for 6 months. And then on month 7, they can, if they get their capital money, they can pay off the robot, or they can simply stay in the monthly payments that they're already designed to meet their budget needs. This is another very popular program that we've seen many of our customers take advantage of. As you can see, the customer finance department with an intuitive ecosystem is here to provide solutions that meet your needs. Now let's turn it back over to Vicki to hear more about the Great Falls Clinic and their experience with intelligent surgery. There you go. Vicki, back over to you.
Thanks, Nick. So I want to talk a little bit more about, from our standpoint, what we felt, that we have as a tool from the intuitive unit that we feel helps us really make a difference in our market. And so for us to focus on the tool itself and what that can do for us to really look at the data, I think it's essential. And the slides aren't moving for me, so bear with me for 1 second. Here we go. So this slide I showed before, and it's basically just to show that we have a computer that's between the doctor and the patient. And so we can really assess a lot of information that's important for us to really determine if our program is successful, and then where do we go to eliminate variation and improve our efficiencies. So as we look at kind of some of the data for us, it's really looking at, we can look at different information in terms of surgeon time. We can look at doc time or consult time. We can make sure that over time we can do a comparison with our providers and make sure that we're understanding what instruments and accessories they're using individually. And then we can also look at standardizing our program. And so when you have that kind of information at your finger, you can compare surgeon to surgeon, you compare procedure to procedure, and then as well, you can really make sure that in your steering committee, you're revealing this information, and then that's going to help us as we really try to assess if there are efficiencies that we're just not being able to achieve. It's really very helpful in the data that we receive from the intelligence system. Abby, can you move the slide? Thank you. And so here you can see that we've got national average spend per case from this is actually the benign hysterectomies at the Great Falls Clinic, but the national average is $14.68. And with Intuitive, we were able to see that our average was $16.14. But the true feature that we're focused on here is that we're actually able to see the difference by surgeon. And it's important for us to be able to see where our opportunities are. And when you bring those surgeon groups together in a steering committee and you can showcase the difference of costs on like cases, that really helps you with your opportunity there to improve those efficiencies. And certainly we all know that physicians are very competitive. And so although we blind the names, they all know what their numbers are. And it's important for us to keep them engaged at our steering committee. Another piece of the information that's great to have at our fingertips is that basically the utilization of our robot by day of the week and by block utilization. So for us to kind of know where our opportunities are if we have more requests by surgeons for robotic time. So as we looked at our program first when we were starting, basically as we were starting with our marketing before we had data at our fingertips, and that's important to remember. I think anybody that's getting into this as a service line, gathering your data from day one is very, very important. And so when you're starting a new service line, you don't have that information at your fingertips. So for us, you know, we focused on the typical type of things we did to make sure that that our patients knew that we were adding the robotic service line to our organization. And we did the typical things with press releases and some contests with local schools. But the other thing we did is that we tried to bring people into our market so they really understood, as we started gathering more data, really where we were showcasing ourselves and the difference we were making in our own market. So we put a lot of effort into our marketing originally, but now it's even more important as we market to the larger employers in the group is really what the data has done since we've added this as a service line. So our ongoing strategy, certainly, we know that we need to recruit and retain provider and staff talent. It's very important to make sure that your providers feel that they've got good strength in the operating room, but it's also important to make sure that you've got a dedicated team to robotics. And that is one of the things that's been important for us as we've evaluated surgeon satisfaction. They want a consistent team, and although you need cross-training, it is important to have a team dedicated to the robotic service line. So when a surgeon comes in, they know that they've got experienced hands in the operating room. So that's very essential. Certainly as well to assess, we're all looking at inpatient, outpatient services, and the more we enter into these minimally invasive procedures, the more we're seeing many of these previous inpatient cases going to outpatient. And so we're always looking at ways to shorten our length of stay and reduce costs that we can pass on to our patients. And then, as I mentioned before, it's about building a program where the experience is exceptional, not only for our providers, but for our patients. And that's something that we just knew. This is a great tool to have at our fingertips, and we don't deny that. But we also know that you've got to have a dedicated team that are really willing to build a program that differentiates you in the market. Because if you're competing with everybody else in the market and in your region, you've got to do something to steer people to come to your facility and what you're doing differently that drives them to your facility. And so that's essential. And certainly, as we're driving people to our facilities, they want to know, if we know that our average length of stay is, X, and we know that our return to work from hysterectomies is 2 weeks versus 6 weeks, that's important information to get out there. And so as we partnered with some of our larger employers, that's an essential piece. We want our employers to know that our surgeons are on board to reduce opioid usage from the beginning, and we educate our patients on that in our robotic handbook. But we also want people to know we're all trying to reduce healthcare costs. Even our organization, we spend a lot of money on extended illness and on time away. And so we want to make sure that our surgeons are on board with understanding that without complication, if a hysterectomy can go back to work in 2 weeks, that's something that we want to promote for those independent surgeons, because that's going to speak volumes to the employers that are trying to reduce their healthcare expense. And keeping our team engaged, that's just always something that's an ongoing process. And certainly as we look to our robotics committee and our steering committee, it's very important that we keep everybody engaged, not only in understanding what our data is, but continuously moving the dial to improve our program. So we have to understand what that ongoing assessment and modification is, and whether it's from an expense control or whether it's to improving the platform from an enhanced recovery after surgery and taking that from one service line to another. Anything we can do to move the dial on length of stay and keeping our team engaged on making a difference so we don't go stagnant, and that's essential. I think if a robotics steering committee is stagnant, your attendance is going to drop, and the engagement of really making sure that your program is engaging and actually continuing to make a difference and move the dial on a routine basis, it's just going to fail. And so certainly we all want to identify the champions in our organization, meet with them regularly, and then from looking at our patients and our surgeons, they all have a choice where they go to get their health care. So you've got to keep them engaged. And it just can't be something that you lose sight of just because you get complacent with your results. So our next steps is certainly we're entering into a data sharing agreement with Intuitive. As I mentioned, we have our own data, but it's really great to have that information at your fingers to understand what that data is for other institutions nationally and statewide, so you can continue to focus on the opportunities to improve basically your outcomes for your patients and expense control. And then clinical benchmarking, that we all like to see where our facilities stand compared to others, and that benchmarking is essential. And then continuing to optimize the service lines as we go forward. That's, as we added the thoracic service line most recently, and making sure that we were very, very thoughtful as we added that service line, not just to compete, but making sure that we were engaged and ready to add that as a service line in our organization. So in summary, I hope you've heard some information on how to build a successful robotic service line, and not just adding the technology, but building a program that can really make a difference in our markets. And as we're all focused on the quadruple aim, it's really for us, the robotic service line has helped us do that. And we really believe that that's information and that getting that out to our patients is essential, because we do need to show that we're engaged in improving satisfaction or reducing costs. And all of that is essential in today's healthcare market. And then utilizing Intuitive's ecosystem of resources, those are things that we're just engaged in more and more now that we've got a strong program. Now we want to continue to fine tune it and make sure that we're using that data to enhance our program. And then leveraging the intelligent insights and use the data for strategic decision making as we go forward. So Scott, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you and see if there are any questions out there. Thank you so very much.
No, thank you, Vicki and Nick, and congratulations on two things. One, the growth of your robotics program. I know it's been a labor of love and been a great vehicle for Great Falls Clinic. And congratulations to Intuitive for their wonderful market leadership in this area. We've got a few audience questions, and I wanted to encourage our audience. Any questions you have, please do go ahead and enter into the question box, and we'd love to respond to those. The first question I have, Vicki, and it's a question for you, is how many robots do you currently have, and approximately what are annual volumes and how's it going?
Thanks, Scott. Right now we have one robot, the XI system. We're contemplating putting one in our outpatient surgery center as well, most for probably the GYN population, but we're still not at maximum occupancy of using our robot right now, and we still have some opportunity there. We're still hovering kind of around that 22 to 35 cases per month, and it certainly waxes and wanes. We had basically some turnover in our general surgery department, and so we saw it drop off, and then more recently in the last 4 months we're seeing those volumes pick up as more surgeons are getting trained. But I think it's important to remember that the other piece for us is that although, for our GYNs, they're still the majority of our robotics cases, but the untold piece here is that they're doing incidental cases while they're in their operating room, and I think most of us know a surgeon wants to fill up their block. And so for us, we've actually doubled our GYN volume from even the robotics cases just because they're doing their incidental cases with it. And so really kind of looking at the, basically that book of business that's coming because those surgeons have that tool at their fingertips is essential.
Got it. So let me ask you two follow-up questions on that. You've seen other incidents of volume increases just due to having the robotic surgery, the Intuitive program.
Yeah, absolutely. Surgeons, they want to make sure that their blocks are full. And so if they want access to the robot and they can add those cases, they're going to fill up the rest of their blocks with their incidental cases. Absolutely.
And how hard has it been to train surgeons on the robot, the Intuitive XI system? How has that been difficult, not that difficult? How are people coming along on that?
And as I mentioned before, 90% when we originally started the program, 90% of our surgeons were independent. And now, we have now several hired employed physicians, but the reality is that, for instance, independent general surgery group or even our thoracic surgeon, we sponsored their education with Intuitive because we knew that giving them that tool is going to help differentiate them in the market. And so, we help to sponsor those for our surgeons because we feel that that training is essential, and then it's going to improve our outcomes as they bring those cases to us. So we win and the surgeon wins by, getting into that book of business and being able to say, I'm the only thoracic surgeon in, the state of Montana doing robotics cases. And so the training sometimes, surgeons have a hard time taking time off away for training, but when 4 out of the 6 surgeons in the community are robotics trained and their patients are asking for it, they know that technology is something that they've got to invest in, and we support them financially, and we try to really make sure that they can get additional simulator time as well as when they're getting credentialed as a new robotics provider.
That's great. And sort of a follow-up question to that has just been asked. How did you educate the public as the advantage of robotics? Is there some stuff you do on that?
Well, we originally started our platform and marketing really about the tool that we had and that we were in the market with the tool. So when people were looking on our website, they knew that that was a service line. But Scott, more recently, it's really been about our data. And because a lot of institutions have Da Vinci robots, but it's about the data and the information that you can pass on to the patients and the market to know the difference. So if I can share with a large employer in the community that colorectal cases, these patients can go from a 7-day length of stay down to a 3.8, that's powerful. And so those are the type of communications that we're having more recently with employers directly. And we still have some of that available on our website. But right now, more it's that, detailed information that we can get out there to the large employers so they can understand that we want to partner with them in reducing healthcare costs. We feel that that's part of our obligation.
Well, thank you. I've got a couple other great questions. Let me make sure I get to these, and I think we've got a couple others as well. In determining projected surgeries, before you decided to invest in and work with the robotic surgery, how did you project cases? Did you just use historical data to support the need, or how did you assess that, yes, you'd be able to make this work?
Once again, Scott, that's a great question because that was our real risk point because we did not have any GYN surgeries at our facility at the time. And so we went out to the surgeons in the community. We had one and the rest of them were independent, and we said, if we have the XI tool and we bring the simulator on, how many cases will you bring to our facility if we have an experienced robotics coordinator in our operating room? And so they basically gave us those numbers of what they thought that they would bring to our institution each and every month. And so, I still think about it and I get palpitations on the fact that, we went out and we built this book of business.
Let me ask you the follow-up question to that. So a surgeon says, and this has been historic for forever with hospitals and surgery centers, a surgeon says, I'm going to bring 20 cases a month. And what's been the actuality of what they've brought compared to what they said they would bring, just in terms of just generally? Because obviously this has worked out well. It's worked out probably as well or better than you expected. But how many of those surgeons said, I'll bring 20 cases a month, I'll bring 4 cases a month, and brought 2 versus 4?
Yeah, there's been a little bit of variation in that, but I think I've had 2 months out of the last, nearly 2.5 years that we've had less than that 22 cases on the Performant. It's typically been in summer when I have provider time off. We have exceeded those numbers month over month. And many of the months we built to perform, as I mentioned, on 22 cases a month with those commitments from the surgeons. And some months we're at 35, Scott.
So that's worked out well. And let me ask you just a follow-up question, and it's a facetious question. But if it's so cold there in the winter, why aren't they taking their vacation in the winter, not the summer? But I'll pass on that question. Vicki, let me ask you, the next question is, if payer mix had not been as favorable as expected, how would that have been financially impacted? How much of a financial negative impact could this have had if payer mix wasn't as expected? Has payer mix been as expected? Just a couple thoughts on that.
Yeah, because we're achieving 45% commercial, you're absolutely right, Scott. The bottom line to our organization was, I think, $2.2 million on that one financial slide. But the reality is, when we built the pro forma, we actually built it with all governmental payers with 22 cases a month, and we still had a positive operating margin of over $1 million. And so I think the reality is that I don't have those, I could do that math pretty quick, but we know even in the pro forma that, it was going to add $1 million to our bottom line every year, even with all governmental payers.
Gotcha. So this has gone really well, it sounds like. Got it. That's very helpful to start to understand some of those numbers. And I appreciate the person who asked that question because it really led to a very informative answer in terms of the results on this. Specific analytical data platform. Do you use a specific analytical data platform for the intuitive robotics?
Well, we basically run reports monthly, and this is part of the platform that we're just getting into, more. We know what our supply cost is, we know what our console time is, and we're working with the intuitive team, and maybe Donald can pipe in here, but using kind of the clinical analytics is something that we're trying to jump into more, so we have more information at our fingertips that we can actually share the data with and continue to progress our program.
Thank you. And I'll ask you one other question that's off the asked questions. 10 years ago, you came to be CEO of Great Falls 6 to 7 years ago. Did you ever think that you'd be doing so much with robotics and this becoming a clear part of the pathway towards moving from open surgery to robotic surgery?
I just have to be frank and admit that I was skeptical. Once I started working with the intuitive reps and my surgeons were the ones that really said, we're seeing the difference. When we didn't have this as a tool at our fingertips, I just kept thinking, minimally invasive surgery, laparoscopic, it's a higher cost. And I didn't really maybe believe what the surgeons were telling me. And I had a surgeon champion that just said, we're seeing so much in terms of reduced pain and reduced opioid usage and return length of stay. Those are the things that I really felt were drivers to us making a decision going forward because we do have such limited bed capacity. And so I was skeptical, and to say I'm a believer is kind of an understatement because it's just amazing to me to see what this technology has done for our patients and for our physician satisfaction.
That's a wonderful note. I think, Nick, I didn't know if there's anything you or Vicki wanted to just briefly add. Otherwise, I just wanted to thank you both very much, and I particularly appreciate both your help here as we move through this Q&A. Nick, I know there's a question you're going to answer separately for people, which is great. Thank you so much. Vicki, you were wonderful, and I'm just thrilled that it's nice to hear a real case study of the profit margins and the improvements in surgery that you guys have found with this. And I hope you continue to grow this program, and congratulations. So thank you to all of you for being part of this today.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks very much for the opportunity. I'd like to thank Vicki, her vision and leadership with the Great Falls Clinic and putting her organization on the path to intelligent surgery and achieving quadruple aim with the assistance of robotic surgery is part of our mission. And we just appreciate her and appreciate you and your organization for having us have this platform.
Thank you so very, very much for the opportunity to share our story.
Thank you. We'll wrap up now. I appreciate you guys joining us so much. Just fantastic. Thank you, and thank you to Intuitive for the support as always. Thank you.